started. All right, we are reconvening. I will take roll. Jessica Spicer.
Here.
Steve Talio.
Here.
Charlie Sorkay.
Here.
Vladimir Ivanovich.
Here.
All board members are present. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vladimir, seconded by Shali. I'll take a quick roll call. Jessica.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Shali.
Yes.
Vladimir.
Yes.
I vote yes. Agenda is approved 5-0. There was no action taken in closed session, so we will move straight to superintendent update.
Yes, good evening. Just wanted to make sure the board knows the end of the school year is winding down here. Wednesday, day after tomorrow, is our last day. Teachers are doing a fantastic job of wrapping up the year with their classes, doing all those end of the year requirements. We have been hard at work at the school sites, distributing materials back to families and taking materials back in from families. So it's been a busy few days over the last week or so. Teachers packing up their rooms as well and preparing for the end of the year. Each of our schools have some sort of virtual celebration, graduation planned at their schools. So those will occur on Wednesday of this week to celebrate the end of the school year. Sandra's hard at work as well, looking ahead to next year, but we'll get into that as we move to the board agenda. So that's it, Brian.
All right. Moving on to section E, consent agenda. Someone want to make a motion about the consent agenda?
I'd like to move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I get a second?
Second.
Moved by Vladimir, seconded by Shali. Do a roll call. Jessica.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Shali.
Yes.
Vladimir.
Yes.
I vote yes. Consent item E1 is approved 5-0. Section F, employee request to adjust the board. I don't think we have any employees today. So, moving on to community comments, unless that's
Brian.
Elena wanting to be an
Yep.
employee. All right.
I think that's right.
All right. Go ahead, Elena.
Hi, thank you. It's Elena. I am speaking on behalf of CSEA. I wanted to thank the district and LATA for the recognition for Classified Employee Week. It's very much appreciated at this time of uncertainty and just unknowing of what's happening. I would also like to thank the LATA. They just started a COVID relief grant for CSEA employees. And we put out applications for that, and we have been overwhelmed with people who are applying for that. So it certainly is a time of financial difficulty for our CSEA members, even though our jobs have not been affected, family members of them have. And so it's something that is an issue, which leads me to my next comment, which is that we had a Q&A for CSEA members on Thursday. There's a lot of concern about layoffs or hours being cut next year or the year after with the dire financial news for the state, and also a lot of concern about safety protocol and how schools will reopen to be safe for students and employees, and making sure that we have protective equipment available and that people use it correctly, which is another issue, and just all of that, and want to be involved in those conversations going forward for reopening schools. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think we have somebody for LATA, so we move on to G, community comments. This time is reserved for the public to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board is not permitted to discuss or take action on non-agenda items except to instruct the superintendent to review the matter further, report back to the board at a subsequent meeting, or place the matter on a future agenda. The board may make a brief comment or ask clarifying questions. Do we have anyone who wants to make a comment on an item not on the agenda? If you do, please raise your hand if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if you're on your phone. I don't see anyone. So I think we'll move on to H1, review of the equity policy. In light of recent events, or in LASD, we value and teach equity, diversity, and inclusion. In light of recent events, including race-related killings and protests in our local communities, the Board of Trustees will discuss the district's commitment to ensure our students are empowered with the tools to build a more equitable and just world. And the board will have the opportunity to review and affirm the district's recent statement on racism and injustice. Mr. Baer.
Yes, thank you. So attached to the agenda are two documents, our current equity policy, as well as the letter that went out to the community. With all that's going on right now in our country, the many discussions that are unfolding about equity and tolerance and social justice, thought it was a good time to bring forward the equity policy to the board just for review, to have a discussion, if necessary, make any adjustments we might see to it, and also have the opportunity to affirm publicly that letter that went out to the community, really putting our stake in the ground about what we believe as a community in our school district. So Brian, probably want to take the policy first, since that's the one that has potential adjustments to it or suggestions.
Sure. Are there any, maybe I'll open it up for public comment before we get to board discussion. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this agenda item? If so, please use the raise hand button if using your Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Not seeing any, then I think we'll open up for board discussion. Who would like to start? Jessica.
Yeah, I have some suggestions for some slight tweaks to the equity policy. I am glad we had it. It feels like February 2020 was years ago. I really honestly, when I looked at this, I'm like, when did we do this? Last year? No, we did it a couple months ago. Anyway, in light of really the fact that racism's been a problem in our country since pretty much the beginning of our country, even before it was founded, since the slave ships landed in Virginia in 1619, I really have I want to make some edits that make sure we're doing enough for our students and our community, and especially the people of color. So I have a couple of edits to the equity policy. So
Jessica, can I just make a quick point? So that this is, if you could, as you do this, cite the page number you're on, so we can find exactly where. And I want to make it known to the board and public, this is not an action item tonight. So we'll take these and then we'll have to have the policy come back next board meeting for action.
Yep.
Okay.
That was my plan anyway. Great. So it's on the second page, number 5. And I would like it to read, adopting age-appropriate curriculum and instructional materials that teach equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-bias, and about the injustices people of color still face this day, and then delete the rest. I think my edits cover the rest. And then I'll, on the next page, which is page 3 at 8, This is more having to do with professional development of staff, and it kind of just really goes along with number 5. Providing district staff with ongoing research-based professional learning and professional development on culturally responsive instructional practices. And then I want to add, and instructional support on teaching equity, diversity, inclusion, anti-bias, and the injustices still faced by people of color today. This is my first round of edits. I do absolutely welcome edits or discussion on it, but it was just really something that's been killing me, and I wanted to make sure that this policy really reflects a little more than we currently have. And I can email this too.
Jennifer, Jessica, sorry. You made an amendment to, or you suggested some rewording of item number 5, and then you said, I believe, and that takes care of the rest. Did you mean 6, 7, and others, or did you mean the rest of 5?
And then that would be so 5 would end on, I would delete accurately reflect the diversity among the student groups, because my edits pretty much cover the feeling otherwise. And then I was saying, then no changes other than on to 8, which covers professional development based on the changes to 5.
Okay, thank you.
Got it.
I wonder if we should, along in number 8, just to build on what Jessica just said, add some wording about understanding institutionalized racism and understanding how that impacts us without us being consciously aware of it. Then I had another question, and I'm not really sure where this would go or if it's even important to put it in, but considering that we're moving more and more towards virtual learning, digital resources, for all of our students, on the first page where we talk about student needs and resources, do we need to call out digital resources, like including digital resources? Because whatever happens at the beginning of the next school year and forward, I think we've moved past making sure kids have notebooks and pencils.
I think that's, yeah, I mean, we can certainly make that clearer. I agree with you. I think it's covered kind of under number 2 on page 2, where it has sort of technology and equipment buried in there. But given what's going on, it may be worth making it a little bit more explicit.
Yeah, I think I would favor making it more explicit, because there are certain communities that don't have as much access to those resources as other communities.
So Shali, can you tell me again where you're referring to that?
Oh, so this was kind of a general comment, but if you look on page 1, and I'm looking at paragraphs 2 and 3, where we, oh gosh, I'm trying to find it. Maybe it's actually in paragraph 3. Impediments to learning faced by students of color. I would like to add, I don't know if the right word is digital or technical, but it's, I feel like lack of digital resources is an impediment to learning, is what I'm trying to say. And I would like to call it out in our policy. I mean, just being aware of that and understanding that.
Okay.
Steve?
Yeah. So I agreed with Jessica on 5. I didn't do as in-depth of an edit as you did, Jessica, but I was definitely looking for us to broaden it beyond students to be more open and encompassing of all groups. And so I used ethnic rather than people of color, but I'm willing to work with whatever works best for everybody else. And then in 4, which is the section 4 right above it on page 2, I thought that should be edited to include families, so that provide a positive school climate that promotes student and family engagement, student safety, and access to instructional materials and other supports for all students, was what I was thinking. I just wanted to call out families in that section because we talk about them in the first paragraph, but when we don't talk about here where we're talking about engagement, we didn't talk about the families at all. I think they should be included at that stage.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
I think I agree with all those suggestions, pending final language. I don't think I have any more.
All right,
Anybody else?
we will we'll get those changed and get it back in front of the board at our next meeting. I think assuming the changes are acceptable as described and as they appear in the revision, you'll see we'll look to have an approval of it at next meeting as opposed to 2 action item readings, if that's acceptable to the board.
Yeah, I think that's acceptable.
I'm-
And I mean, I think we should get it approved because when I expect that it will have, you know, an impact on the planning that we're doing for the fall, right? Because there will definitely be issues that intersect with this.
Sure. And then
Okay.
the second document that was there was just the letter that went out to the community last week. And just there, if the board wanted to make comment on it or cite anything you've heard as a result of sending the letter. I don't know if you've perhaps received or heard comments from the community. I can tell you that I heard numerous positive comments from our community. That includes parents and teachers, as well as some questions about experiences that families have had within our school district that we're working on following up on right now to find out a bit more and see if there are ways that we can continue to grow and improve as a school district for the families that we serve.
Anyone have any follow-up comments on this one? Go ahead, Vladimir.
I don't have any particular comment about the letter, but something just occurred to me that a lot of organizations, both commercial and educational, appoint a person to be the point person for equity and diversity. And I wonder if we should do the same thing.
Okay, Sandra?
Yeah, I can certainly look at that and see if I can come up with a suggestion for you on that. So let me do that.
Okay. Jessica, did you have something?
It was just really a thank you for getting the letter out. And, you know, really, the communication was exactly what our community needed. And pretty much every single word I would stand by. So really great work and the LASD team getting it out. So thank you. And I had not heard, I've only heard words of praise of the letter and thankful that we got it out. So thank you.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I'll second the thank you. And the second also, I think if we can identify a person that makes sense, I think it might be helpful to have the point person to be able to collect reports, data, just somebody who we can look to. Okay, we will move on then to H2, reopening for the 2020-21 school year. Staff will review current progress being made toward the opening of schools for the next school year. Mr. Baer.
Yes. As you look at the agenda, I just want to point you to, there are a number of attachments there, and it's grown a little bit over the weekend. But as I've spoken to you in previous meetings, the looking to the reopening of school is really a multifaceted process. Sandra's doing fantastic work right now looking at the teaching and learning program and what reopening may entail for that. Erin Green in her department is health services, so looking at the safety protocols and the health protocols for that is important. We have Jennifer Kiker involved as well, understanding that the overlay for special education students and families varies a bit, and we want to make sure we're paying attention to that. And then Randy and his team looking at the operations, right? What does this mean for us operationally in terms of spaces and cleaning and preparations for that? So it is complicated, to say the least. We have a great deal going on every day with this, and in all of those areas. And the biggest challenge has been and remains right now that we don't yet have clear direction on this. So I've described to our team that we're continuing to move these pieces forward to the point in the road where it forks, right? And we have to make decisions to go right or left based on the information we have from various agencies that oversee this. And we're starting to see that. As I said, attached to your agenda, or attached to the agenda, is, let me get back there. First of all, a letter to the community that was signed off on by the 31 superintendents in the county, as well as the county office, really making everyone aware that there is understanding that we're eager to get back to school and understand what the start of school looks like in the fall. Excuse me. And we are working and doing that in a collaborative fashion and having some level of consistency across the county, especially with regard to adherence to the protocols that will be set forth by the county office, the public health department. You'll see in here that July 1st, there's a statement in here that an announcement with an update of how schools may reopen in the fall will be made by Wednesday, July 1st. So we look forward to that. That will be guidance from the county Office of Education, as well as the Santa Clara County Public Health Department in conjunction with one another. Also attached are some additional documents that have begun coming out, right, as we get closer and closer. The next one there is a recovery and reopening schools in Santa Clara County document. It's the document that we are using, a working version of it, that we are using to really look at the idea of things that need to be done now, things that need to be done over the summer, and things we need to do once school reopens, whatever that looks like in the fall. Broken into 3 areas of health and safety, of operations, and of teaching and learning. So that's kind of the guiding document. This document is laid out in a way that allows for adjustment once the orders come from the public health department. Next, there are 2 documents that are essentially the same sets of information. And these just came out Friday. And this is guidance from the California Department of Public Health. Their guidance around what school reopening considerations need to be adhered to and paid attention to. It does defer, as you read the California Department of Public Health document, it does defer to any local orders that may vary from this guiding document, but the state really felt it was important as June was opening up to release guidance to school districts on a variety of categories, from general measures to hygiene to cleaning and disinfection of school premises to implementing distance learning both inside the classroom and outside the classroom, and training of staff. So we are just looking through that and sifting through that document to understand how it aligns with what we have from the county thus far. The last one, I'll just hold it up because I have it here in paper form. The last one was just released. We found it today. This is a more detailed roadmap to this document, the California Department of Public Health. It gives a little bit more color in the various areas, but by and large, it is similar information. So we are and will be consulting those documents as we do our planning, and really looking for the release of the county data or the county orders from the Department of Public Health that are really going to end up driving what we are able to do here locally. We know our parents, we know two things, that our parents and teachers are anxious to know what the plans are. And I'll affirm we are too. And they are also anxious to get back to in-person teaching and learning. And we are as well. That is the goal. We know that that is the best environment for our kids to learn, is to be in a classroom with a teacher in front of them, having human interaction. We just need to wait for the time and understand how we can do that safely and in a way that really protects everybody's health and safety in addition to their learning. And that's our classified staff, that's our certificated teaching staff, our administration, our students, our parents, it's everyone, right? Our system doesn't work if any one of those groups has a compromised situation. So we understand how critical it is. So I just wanted to make you aware and make the public aware of those documents that we are using as guidance and that we are using to plot our course forward with regard to opening. We know teaching and learning is a huge part of that. And everything else, much like our everyday existence in public education is, everything else is there to support what goes on in the classroom, right? Our job, my job, Sandra's job, Randy's job, we're all there to support what happens out at our 9 school sites. So we are seeking to understand that better and ready to put together that detailed plan once we have the guidance we need. Sandra, do you want to say anything about planning and kind of where you are? I know you don't have full details yet, but
yeah, our think tank group has worked its way through 8 different scenarios, and I would say within those 8 different scenarios, we've really probably discussed 15 different scenarios as we've mixed and matched different things. But like Jeff said, so much of it is dependent on what the actual guidance is from the state, and a lot of those other factors around will we have access to the materials, the cleaning supplies, the PPE, and all of that for the fall, because that will also be dependent on whether or not we can attempt to run some type of hybrid program or blended program for students. So yeah, we've had a lot of really interesting conversations, and as I've just even been meeting with teachers across the district this week virtually, just trying to start wrapping their head around some of the possibilities for the fall so they can begin to think through what that might look like. But we're hoping to put together a kind of an outline of a plan that we can flex before the end of the month and to bring that to you.
I think one thing I will highlight, and then it would be good to hear from the board at our next meeting. You will hear from, this is the 22nd, right? You will hear from Sandra that kind of the first pass, the first look at that plan for the board to react to. But other areas that you would like to hear more detail on, so we can be prepared to prioritize the reporting of that as well. Once we get that information from the county, because we will be pouring through dozens, if not hundreds, of specific points to address, but understanding what the board would like prioritized and understanding both for yourselves and for the public would be helpful. Before we hear that, though, one thing that I will point out in the California Public Health Department document is that it does move away from identifying a cohort size, right? We had been hearing a great deal about 10 or 12 or 15 students in a cohort at a time. This document is moving away from that. So that is interesting. And we actually are anticipating hearing something similar from the state on this topic. So stay tuned on that. But I think both the state and the local governments realize that children returning to school are a critical part of kind of normalcy returning, and trying to figure out how to safely do that is something they certainly have their eyes on.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any burning questions before I open it up for public comment? Not seeing any. We will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Please make sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to comment? Not seeing any. We will go back to board discussion. Who would like to start? Vladimir.
Jeff, thank you. Sandra, thank you. Randy, thank you. Erin, thank you. This is a huge amount of work. I mean, I took a look at one of the documents, and the things that you have to consider are just enormous. Obviously, things are getting pushed off that you would otherwise do during this time. And so I'm wondering if there's something that we should do, or collectively we should do, to help mitigate that extra load that you're facing. So that's one comment. The second comment is, seems to me at least that the hybrid version of school the most problematic. If we're distance learning, that's another thing, but it's the intermediate model that I think that has the most chance for hiccups. I don't know, Sandra, you probably have thought about this way more than I have, so I will always refer to you on those matters. I will say that there are, with the hybrid model, there are things that crop up that just don't crop up with other models. That's all.
Sandra, do you want to say anything about that, or?
Sandra, do you want
Sure. I think it would be very dependent in a hybrid model how you define like what happens in the online component of learning and what happens in the classroom component of learning. It does allow us to bring kids back onto campus in some way, right? Which I know has been a big topic of conversation, not only with our staff, but with our families as well.
And Sandra, I've heard you talk about this idea of if we are in a hybrid model, really thinking about and understanding what are the critical interactions that you want to take place when you have
Students in front of
live kids in front of you, right? As opposed
Absolutely.
to
all the things that don't
on
work
screen.
well virtually, right? All of those things, the small groups, the formative assessments that you want to give students, the talking, the discussion, the bringing out my own individual math manipulatives that I can't share with my neighbor next door, but really trying to make meaning with students so that learning happens, the discussion.
And to your first question, Vladimir, about, it's a lot of work and what can you do? I don't know that there is anything. We realize it is a tremendous amount of work. But we're being called upon to do it right now, right? The country and the world, not to sound too dramatic, are in a really difficult place right now. And as public educators, we're being called upon to step up and figure out a way to do our part to keep children educated and get the country moving again, right? Get our district moving again, get our state moving again. So yes, it's hard. Yes, it's requiring extra effort, really beyond belief. But right now it's kind of a duty call situation, and it's we all signed up to be in public education, and this is what's required right now. And we're here, and we will deliver on something fantastic for our students and families.
Absolutely.
Jeff, I really appreciate that. Thank you. I wonder, are there former principals or other senior staff that we could call on to help us in some parts of this?
Yeah, I would have to give that some thought. Just because it is so upside down right now that there's really, there just seem to be limited leverage points to latch onto right now.
I don't want to force anything.
Yeah,
Seriously.
no.
Also add that things are so intertwined right now. The work that we're doing to wrap up this year and to prepare for next year and to educate our staff and families, and it doesn't feel like there's just one thing that somebody could come in and pluck out and take care of. It's really complex work. But thank you for the sentiment.
Yeah, that was why I suggested a former administrator or senior staff member, because they would have the knowledge that goes around any particular topic that you might want to address. That's all. Yeah. That's it.
Okay, Shelley?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. So I want to echo about Vladimir's thanks. A huge thanks to Sandra and Jeff and Randy. These are huge, huge undertakings and completely unprecedented for us. And because we're kind of entering uncharted waters, one thing I didn't see in the Santa Clara County document, and maybe I missed it, is the sort of constant monitoring and evaluation of our kids. And by that, I don't mean testing them. I mean relying on the teacher's own knowledge of, are our kids, how do I put this? Where are our kids at any given point in the school year as compared to previous school years? Are our kids a little bit further ahead? Are they a little bit further behind? And then also, based on that kind of monitoring, to consider creating maybe a more robust summer program next summer in 2021, if our kids are not where we would like them to be. But that's it. But thank you.
I think that's a great suggestion, Shelley. Thank you.
Thanks, Vladimir.
Sandra, anything to say on that, or
Oh, I think
not
it's
really?
a great idea. I know as I've been meeting with different grade levels, I've been trying to gauge with, were they able to finish kind of teaching the expected curriculum that we had identified that we should teach this spring? And just about everyone has said that yes, they were able to teach, but I think it really will come back to not testing, not assessing, but once the new year begins, really understanding what is it that kids know and are able to do, and what next year looks like, and being able to respond to that hopefully next summer with a more robust program for sure, and throughout the school year, of course. It's what our teachers are expert at, is responding to the needs of our kids.
Thanks. Steve?
Just a couple things that struck me from the California documents. One was the idea that education as it's will be delivered, or saying the idea that it's not just hybrid in terms of class out of class, but it'll be very different by grade level as well. And to be expecting that and kind of set that expectation with the general public out there, that what your child might see in K3 would be very different from what they might see in the next level up and the next level up. So the structure could look very, very different as we roll it out. The thing that didn't get addressed in that document anywhere was the idea that we are care providers during the school year.
Yep.
So if we have a flex model where some children are online, some people are live, what do you do with the children who have to be there all the time? And how do we cover that support? There's certainly some ideas about you have to put barriers, that the safety constraints were in that document, but they didn't call out the fact that, you know, the idea that we need to provide that support for non-essential workers moving forward, that role that we provide during the school year opens back up again, and one that we have to consider as we're putting models out there. And I think those were the two things that leaped out of me in those documents as we're kind of trying to plan and move forward. It's kind of what I was unable to have intelligent input into Sandra's education discussions and models of delivery, but that's where I was thinking, was that structure in terms of how do we structure a school day, and who do we allow on campus? This idea that Randy at one point in his budget referred to the 100,000 hours of volunteer hours. Reality is we probably can't do that next year.
Right.
At least in the first half. So we're, it's restricting the number of people on campus, flexibility of people doing roles they may not normally do, and having them put, so that's the things that are being evaluated as we're putting these models together, I think. And people just need to have an open mind about where this is going. So it's going to look very different from what they might be comfortable or used to.
Yeah, and it's not a one-size-fits-all model at all. We've talked a lot about what our international folks who have gone back to school, that most are starting with our youngest learners who have the least independence to be able to learn virtually and, kind of build their way up. The older you get, the more independent you are typically. And then we know we have our special populations of students who also struggle with independent learning, whether that's because of learning differences or that they don't have a command of the English language and find it a challenge to learn. So what are our special population needs around coming back to school next year?
Jessica?
I have only a little bit to add, pretty much echo what everybody has said so far. Just from a parenting standpoint, I've just noticed, just this last weekend, I let my son have a celebration where there were 7 boys. They were kept at a safe distance. He had just graduated 8th grade. I can tell you the child that left was a moody 14-year-old. The person who came back was rejuvenated. This kid, I didn't recognize him. And he's an introvert. So I just, any kid is going to do better. We've already said it as it relates to instructions. They're going to do better if we can do it in person, but a lot of it is actually the social emotional. They'll just be glad to see those kids, whether they're 6 feet away from them or not, in person, because it's now a novelty. which is sad. So that's one piece. I hope we at least have some version of a hybrid that we're planning for, that is kind of what we end up choosing at least. And, you know, I know that a lot of the decision making, or what we're looking at, is really, we are going to have to take inventory of our facilities to see exactly how many kids we can fit into a classroom. I was quite literally envisioning a classroom and started stripping away furniture to see how many kids could fit in. That's just, you know, how I process. So I'm amazed. You have no easy task to do. As it relates to, you know, I guess we'll be meeting in 2 weeks, where you'll let us know what our, you know, first choice, based on the information we have. I do think that we may want to have at least another board meeting, or at least a town hall or something after that, before June 29th, just to make sure we're getting communication out and get people to come in and give their input. I think it's very important, and really just in general communication, over communication on this, because this is a big deal, and people have to plan, not unlike we have to plan for it, the parents have to plan for it. And I think that's it.
Okay. Yeah, along those lines, actually, I think, Jeff, I heard you say that there's going to be guidance coming out on July 1st, which I hadn't heard before. So should we actually push back our sort of target date from the 29th to the 6th to be after that, or do both, or what's your thinking there?
I'd like to wait until oftentimes prior to the official word coming out, you start to hear you know, rumblings or indications of where this is headed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would be good to wait until we get a bit closer to make that decision
Okay.
on whether to just go on the 29th or to wait until the 6th. I certainly wouldn't want to be in a situation where we make a decision or an announcement on the 29th that the information 2 days later completely changes, right? That we don't want.
Okay, so we'll hold
I think we'll just wait till it gets a little closer.
We'll keep on the 29th. If board members can pencil the 6th in, just in case, I think that would be helpful. Lots of contingency planning. So I think everybody has hit most of my other points. This is going to be, there was a presentation from a public health official recently, which was surprising, as Jeff indicated, that person said that the 12 student cohorts may not be a thing. She also said that she was envisioning sort of an iterative process over the next month, basically. So, which, you know, is better than them decreeing constraints that we can't possibly deal with. But I think things will continue to evolve. I listened in on the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors had a hearing this morning about middle school and high school reopening. And it was very brief. They had 5 speakers, each got 3 minutes. So there wasn't much back and forth, but the representative of a high school district basically flatly said that cohorts don't work in high school. There's no way you can have a stable group of 12 or even 20 kids in a high school setting. And that largely applies, not quite as much to junior highs, but it's an issue with junior highs as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. The other question I have for you, Sandra, was whether you had, I know you mentioned you were talking about to representatives of teachers and staff and special ed. And I was wondering if you had sort of parents involved in that sort of iterative process as well at this stage.
We have not at this stage, but I think the goal was to start after sharing, getting some feedback on what works. Of course, we collected survey data from parents as a way to collect some information from them, but no, they have not been a part of our group.
Okay, my suggestion would be it might be better sooner rather than later over the next 2 weeks to at least have some conversations with some of our parents in, I mean, not a huge group, but maybe a small group broadly representative of our different family circumstances. And the only reason I say that is because as I've looked through the presentation, similar presentations to this in other school districts, most of the other districts, as far as I can tell, are involving parents at this stage in their planning processes. So, I think the more feedback, the earlier, the better, I think.
Sure.
Vladimir?
Just a comment. I don't think, and I think this applies to everybody, I don't think we realized how much we miss teachers until they've gone.
Certainly. And the other question I had actually for Jeff or Randy, I know as part of the state rollout of guidance, they also announced that they've got a tremendous amount of materials that they're planning to distribute to schools. Do we have any sense how they're going to do that, or if we will get any of that?
So we just talked about that this morning, about that same information. We don't, and we are assuming that it isn't necessarily going to come to us in time, because I just don't think we can plan on that. I think we need to move forward the acquisition of our own supplies, and if that does end up coming, that's great. But it just seems like a bit of a risky proposition to hope that the state comes through with the materials that they described. So we'll go down both paths.
Okay, that's sort of what I figured the answer would be. I don't think I have much else. I think the last thought I had, I think as Steve alluded to, is that at this point, it does seem quite likely that we'll have different plans for different grades, maybe even different plans for different student profiles. I mean, as we know that there are students who have done better and students who have done not as well with the remote learning. And so, especially given the conversation that we had earlier on equity, I would expect that our plans would take that into account as well. So, okay. Moving on to H3, LASD COVID-19 operations report. The Board of Trustees will consider approving the 2020-2021 LASD COVID-19 operations report. Mrs. McGonigal.
Thank you. And Marcy, are you going to put up my one slide? There you go. Thank you. And you can go to the next slide. All righty. So speaking of things that thankfully I didn't have to write a 75-page LCAP during all of this work, and I am quite appreciative of the state's flex and what this looks like. And so you have before you tonight our COVID-19 operations written report, and it details those bullets up on the left there. I don't believe any of this is a surprise to you or to our community, because we've been talking about kind of going into our phase 1 and phase 2 of distance learning. And so it was really just a way for us to document the work that we have done and how that has changed between March 16th until present day. So I hope you've had a chance to review the written report today, along with Randy's budget. I ask that you, well, Randy's budget is separate, but on the same day, we ask that you approve the COVID-19 operations report. And upon your approval, it will be shared with the county. It doesn't have to be approved by the county, whereas our LCAP does require county approval, but this document is just shared with the county and will be posted on our district website for folks to read through if they have an interest in understanding kind of the evolution of our distance learning program at a very small detail, as opposed to the great detail that's gone into actually delivering the program. So I'm happy to answer questions that you might have around the report, but I'm hoping you will approve this evening.
Thank you. Any preliminary questions? Board members? Seeing shaking heads. We will now take public comments on this agenda item. To comment, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app or press *9 if using your phone. Do we have anybody who wishes to comment? Seeing none, board discussion. Any board members have any comment? No? No. Such an excellent document. We can't possibly add any detail or make any improvements. So thank you, Sandra, for doing this on top of everything else.
No worries.
This is an action item, so I'm going to need a motion.
I move to approve the operations report as presented.
Second.
All right, moved by Vladimir, seconded by Shally. We will now take a roll call vote. Jessica,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Shally,
Yes.
Vladimir. Vladimir,
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that was a yes. I vote yes. Report is approved 5-0.
Thank you.
Moving on to H4, 2020-2021 district budget. The board of trustees will consider approving the 2020-2021 district budget. Mr. Kenyon.
Thank you, Brian. I know Marcy's going to put the slides up. This is an action item. At the last board meeting a week ago, you got a presentation as part of a public hearing on the budget. So tonight, I'm not going to review any of the details of the budget, but just give you kind of a quick overview of the process tonight and share a few key points. So moving through the slides, as you know, I think we've already commented this. It is legally required that we adopt our budget before July 1, before even the state has adopted their budget. I've indicated that in the appendix to this presentation are all the slides I presented last week. If you need to review any of that or have any questions, we can go through that appendix briefly. And Sandra already commented that the LCAP has been postponed to December. So moving on to the third slide number 3, Marcy. Our budget will meet all our state requirements, not only for the budget year, but for the 2 succeeding years. So I'm going to recommend that you adopt the budget as presented. As you well know, I've been saying over the last month or two that there are potentially lots of changes that could occur regarding the budget. So I will be likely presenting some budget adjustments later in the summer when we have more information. We should probably know more about the state budget by the end of this week. They have a June 15th deadline for the legislators to get paid for getting a budget adopted. And so the legislators and the governor's negotiations will be hot and heavy this week to see exactly what comes out as the state adopted budget. You know very well that the legislative groups and committees have not been totally in sync with the governor's May revised proposals. So we'll see what happens going forward. There are other changes potentially between now and August, September. More information about income tax, personal income tax, property tax revenues that will inform not only the state's budget, which they likely will adjust in late summer, but also ours. So moving on to the next slide. I just have a few slides to share some top level information. Point out on this slide, this is kind of looking at 2 years, our current year, estimated our enrollment and some estimated final numbers, revenues per student and so forth, compared to our budget year. Note that under the assessed valuation, we have almost 7% growth in our assessed value through 11 months. We have one more month to go. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable with our 5% property tax growth assumption that's in our budget. At least right now, I'm feeling comfortable. Note also that our reserve level is projected to be about the same as we're projecting the end of 2019, the current year, just under 8%, based on all the assumptions we have built in at this time. Note also that there's 5 fewer teachers projected based on a decline in enrollment for next year. Next slide. You can see here the tremendous growth, significant growth in assessed value of property in the district over the last 10 years, more than doubling where we were about 10 years ago. Going on to the next slide. Go back one. Just a reminder that almost all of our revenues come from local sources, 91%. You can see how important they are to us. And the next slide. Tried to translate those revenues into a per student figure. These are sort of, these are approximate numbers rounded. So you can see on a per student basis, again, where our top revenues are. And I think I have 1 or 2 more slides. Oh, this one. Just a reminder that the property tax collections, the money that we get in, and this data here is for the current year, 1920, a little under $50 million in property tax collections, but a reminder that we share some of those monies with the charter school based on the number of students they have. So about 8.3 million goes to the charter school this year. So our net property tax revenues that we have to spend on our students, about 41 million out of that 49.3 million total. And a reminder that part of the parcel tax, the $223 parcel tax that voters approved in 2016 goes to the charter school, about $530,000. So next slide. Wanted to share with you a reminder about the impact of our contributions towards the state retirement systems. You can see a little dip from 1920 to 2021 because of the proposals from the governor to give us some relief in our contributions. But that doesn't work long-term as our contributions continue to grow as a percent of our total expenses. I think that's my last slide, Marcia, other than the appendix. So again, this is an action item. I'm asking you to approve the budget that was presented last week and is included as part of the appendix tonight. Asking you to approve that. I'm happy to answer any questions. We'll move it back to you, Brian.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Are there any preliminary questions from board members? Seeing none, we will open this item for public comment. If you would like to comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app or press *9 if using your phone. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak? Seeing none, we will return to board discussion. Anyone have any discussion they would like to say? No? Oh, Vladimir.
The one thing I didn't see in the budget presentation, which was, thank you, Randy, very complete, was what are particular trigger points that we pay close attention to? If this happens, then we will have to do something. And that was, I think, not included in the discussion.
Yeah, so I tried to include some of that last week at the public hearing, Vladimir, and it's a good point. Trigger points, including such things as the state budget and what they might do in terms of shorting revenues to all districts, and in particular to us as a basic aid district, what those impacts might be. And I shared with you last time that those could be quite severe. or they could be fairly minimal as the governor proposed. So we'll see what happens with that. Property tax collections, while seemingly good for the upcoming year, big concern for the following year. So a trigger point on that will be probably early December when we find out more information about the annual inflation factor on property values, whether it's positive or negative. It could be negative. And what the county assessor sees in terms of roll growth or roll decline based on what the market values look like next year. We'll have a pretty good indication next December. I'm looking forward to 21-22. And we also will have some indication on what the delinquencies are and whether that's going to impact our collections at all for the 2021 year. Those are two big important factors. Other trigger points will include things like, what are the requirements for a reopening of school and what does that necessitate in terms of additional technology, additional services, perhaps additional cleaning services that we might need, additional help in that area, additional meal services that we might have to provide. Those are some key trigger points. I could probably mention a whole bunch more. Certainly I want to hear what how the state budget turns out at the end of this week. Hope that begins to answer your question.
Yes, thank you. I too am waiting very impatiently for the state budget.
Anyone else? Steve or Jessica? Nope. Yeah, I think it's been stated before. This is basically a sort of a status quo placeholder budget until we figure those things out. There is some money sort of set aside in a nominal way to cover increased costs, but who knows what that's going to be like. It occurred to me, Randy, just to be clear, I don't know why, this probably should have occurred to me under our earlier planning item, but we're not envisioning adding any spaces to any of our campuses as part of facilitating, more social distancing during a reopening, right? That's not an option that we're looking at.
At this point, we're not, and I think that's could be a major issue for us as well as all districts throughout the state. If all of a sudden state opens up and says, yeah, kids should come back, but they come back in groups of 15 or less, and you need to have classrooms to handle all that. There won't be facilities throughout the state for that.
Yeah, well, even on a calendar, based on previous experience, it's too late already to try to get portables down for August.
Absolutely. You have to go through the whole DSA approval process, and we're way too behind the 8 ball on that.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. I don't have any other comments or questions at this point, so I'm prepared to entertain a motion.
I'd like to move that we approve the budget as presented.
Second.
All right, approval moved by Vladimir, seconded by Shali. We'll take a roll call vote. Jessica?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Shali?
Yes.
Vladimir?
Yes,
I vote yes. Budget is approved, 5-0. Moving on to H5, Measure N Citizens Oversight Committee Annual Report. Citizens Oversight Committee will present its annual report for approval. Mr. Kenyon.
Yes, I will make this presentation on behalf of the committee. This is an action item. Again, the committee is required by law to make a report to you every year after they've reviewed the annual audit of bond measure expenses for the year ahead, the year previous. So the committee received the annual audit report fairly recently at its most recent meeting. And that covers the year that ended June 30, 2019, almost a year ago. So it's, just to be clear, it reflects data going to that point. The committee received the audit report. They understood it. They feel good that the district has followed all the requirements under the Measure N bond measure language. And all of our expenses meet those requirements. the committee is recommending that you approve their annual report and their review of the audit. I will comment, they did call out one item. I give them a financial update at every meeting, which is quarterly. And they called out one item, which is expenditures in the consulting service and district program administration area. And I will say that I think they mostly wanted to call this out because there was around $12 million noted in that area over our last couple financial reports. And I explained to them that 10 million of that was paying off the Wells Fargo line of credit that we did. So I don't think that, I think they get that, but it didn't totally sink in. They still see the $12 million. They just want to call that to your attention. The $2 million that's remaining is a whole bunch of expenses for consultants and attorneys. You'll recall that we've been working on the acquisition of that site and continuing forward for 3.5 or so years. So it's been a very involved process, lots of different parties involved, lots of technical and legal input. So we've had significant expenses to acquire the property at the great price that we're able to afford with all the TDR program and the deals with our city of Mountain View. So there will continue to be costs as we move forward as well. They just wanted to call that to your attention. All those costs are quite in line with our Measure N bond measure language and have been reviewed by our attorney and as well as our auditor. So again, I'm recommending that you approve this report from the committee.
All right, any board member questions? I will move on to public comment. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if on Zoom or press *9 if using your phone. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment? Yes, I do see one. So your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes. Marcy, can you please call the first speaker?
Danielle James is the first speaker.
Hi. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Danielle.
Okay. Now I'm sorry, I'm losing it. I'm losing my copy of the agenda. Is this on the non-certificated or the non-certificate staff or?
No, sorry, Danielle. This is Measure N Citizens Oversight Committee annual report.
Oh, you're still on the Measure N. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Wrong item.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right. Okay. So further board discussion? Steve.
I just have one question. Did I hear correctly? This is almost a year in the process of audit to get to us. Is that a normal turnaround time for this, or is there a way to shorten that, do you think? Or does it need to be shortened?
So this is the same timeline we've used the last couple of years, ever since past Measure N actually started spending money. The audit report is finalized by around January. So we review that at our March meeting because we meet in December, January, June, and September. So March, their next meeting is right before your meeting in June. So this is the normal timeline, to Steve. And unfortunately, you're right. It's almost a year later. I believe we share the report with you when we do our annual audit report in January, however, so you get a preview of it.
Anyone else?
Brian, I just wanted
Yes.
to acknowledge that a member of this committee, Duncan McVicker, has passed away in the last few months here. Duncan, just a bit of recognition, Duncan has done so much for our school district. He has, probably for a full 8 years been involved with evaluation, examination, search, suggestions, recommendations for acquiring land. And just want to take a moment to recognize that we have lost him, and he's a great person, and was a member of this committee.
Just to piggyback on that, Brian, yes, we'll let you know that we'll be bringing a replacement to you for approval probably in the around September for that committee, as we're working towards finding a senior citizen representative. And Eleanor Duncan was on the Superintendent's Enrollment Growth Task Force that finished their report in 2011, I believe. 10th Site Committee, he's been on this Citizens Oversight Committee, as Jeff alluded to. Great asset to us.
Yeah, it's a big loss to the district and the community, unfortunately. All right, I'm prepared for motion since this is an action item.
I'd like to move that we approve the Citizens Oversight Committee report and the associated audit as presented.
Second.
Moved by Vladimir, seconded by Shelley. Roll call vote. Jessica.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Shelley.
Yes.
Vladimir.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to H6, Resolution 19/20-30, Declaration of Need for Fully Qualified Educators. The Board of Trustees will consider approving a resolution providing administrative flexibility to hire employees with emergency permits. Mr. Baer.
Yes, so this resolution, if needed, allows the administration, as you said, flexibility to hire teachers on emergency permits. We never anticipate needing to use this and haven't used it in some number of years, but request having it in place should we get to the end of the summer and cannot find a fully credentialed teacher. It does allow us to hire someone on an emergency permit. Again, don't anticipate using it, but would like that flexibility should it be necessary in an emergency situation.
All right. Do you have any preliminary board questions? Public comment? I think Danielle, yes. Let me just read this. We will now take public comment. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes.
Our first speaker is Danielle Jane.
Hello. I just wanted to say that I'm not exactly sure if this is the right topic, but given that we don't know what the scenario will be for the fall or throughout the year, and I'm not sure who you'd be targeting either, but there are a bunch of college students. Some schools have already said that they are not returning in the fall. And so if you needed to break out and have more supervisors for smaller groups of kids, and you could expand, and on a temporary basis, for the time that we're all dealing with this, then you could maybe use this to bring on those people. So that's my comment.
Thank you. All right. I don't see anybody else. Is there any board discussion? I don't see any of that either. I think it's an interesting suggestion, probably a little bit not quite relevant to this item, but a thought in planning, as we've mentioned childcare quite a bit in the various scenarios. All right, this is an action item. I am willing to entertain a motion.
Surprisingly, I'm ready to move that we approve Resolution 1920-30, Declaration of Need for Fully Qualified Educators. Charlie, over to you.
I'd like to second Vladimir's motion, please.
All right, we'll call the roll. Jessica,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Vladimir.
Yes.
I vote yes. Sorry, motion was by Vladimir, second by Shali. Motion passes 5-0. We'll move on to board and administration comments. Jeff.
Nothing additional.
Okay. Sandra.
I'll just say I've been meeting regularly with my counterparts in our partner districts. We have another meeting this Friday. We meet at least every other week, if not every week. And that has been productive just to make sure we're all sharing the latest and greatest information about what's happening in the world and how we're going to educate students next year. And then I have spent the last week plus having Google Meets with teachers across the district and just asking and answering questions around our professional development and what that looks like, and starting to plant some seeds for next year to have them start wrapping their brains around what are the possibilities. So they've been very productive. I appreciate their time. That's it.
Randy.
Nothing new, Brian.
Okay. Vladimir.
Oh, no, nothing. Thanks.
Okay. Shali.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Nothing. I just attended the Santa Clara County Stronger Together Recovery webinar thing last week. It was interesting.
Steve. Jessica.
No, nothing to add. I attended that Stronger Together webinar. It was useful. I look forward to when we get more information.
Indeed. Let's see, I attended that as well. I've also been attending the weekly public health department calls for elected officials. And Senator Hill had his annual education roundtable virtually, which was somewhat interesting. I'm always slightly surprised that he's surprised by some of the issues that affect us, but there are quite a few districts that are in much worse shape than we are. So he heard that loud and clear, along with some suggestions about what they hoped he could do about it. And I think that is about it.
Here's a
Oh,
And
Randy.
yeah, sorry, I forgot. One more thing, just a reminder, tomorrow night, the Mountain View City Council meets and they will be discussing their school strategy, particularly for Mountain View Westman and Mountain View Los Altos High School District. So if you're interested to tune into that meeting.
Yes, thank you. I will be tuning into that. The agenda is up if you want to look into what it is. It as far as I can tell, it backs off on some of the things that got floated earlier and sort of holds up a TDR program as an example of how they could help the school districts, or a few other ways to allow developers to shift development rights from one part of their property to another, but doesn't look like it's going to impose extra fees in the ways that were being discussed earlier on. So if nobody has anything else, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you on the 22nd.
Yep.